Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
In the spirit of reconciliation, Love on Campus acknowledges the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians of the land we meet on today, and we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and First Nations people.
Hello, I am Kathleen Stanley and you are listening to Love on Campus. Today I am joined by the lovely Georgia Nichols.
Hello.
And the wonderful Dr. Amy Matthews.
Hi.
And today we are talking about our first subgenre week.
Yay.
Yay!
Love a subgenre.
Yes. Do we want to start talking a little bit, before we go into it, about what a subgenre is, especially in romance?
Yeah, oh my God, there's so many of them.
All right, Amy, you take it.
Dumped myself in there. So genres are quite broad, right? So you can have romance or horror or sci-fi, but subgenres are kind of getting to what people really read. So although we all read romance, we don't all read the same romance usually.
Definitely.
So rom-coms are like the thing right now, all those candy-coloured covers.
Yes, definitely.
But there's also historical romance. There is romantic suspense, Western romance. Even if you pick one like historical romance, there's subgenres in historical romance. So you have romance, historical romance, Regency romance, medieval romance, Viking romance,
Western romance. I was waiting for it.
Yeah, that's my personal jam.
I feel like romance compared to, say, other genres has probably some of the most broad subgenres. Like, I think romance gets divided up. Is that just me?
Yeah, it's quite granular. I think it goes down into quite fine-grained subgenres.
Yes, and people have their favorites. Like it's not like people are really diehard. Is guess what I'm trying to say. Like they're very diehard on their subgenre of what they love.
I guess it's similar. It always makes me think a little bit of like superheroes.
Yes.
Like it's a fandom, so people kind of have their favourites. So like not all superhero fans are created equal, right? Like some people are like into Superman and some people would rather read, I don't know, dystopic Joker fiction.
Yeah, you're a DC or a Marvel.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Definitely. And I think that's the same. Like there's a lot of people who really die hard historical, but they won't necessarily read all historicals. They'll be like really into Regency or...
Yeah. And particularly, I'm not sure how much we're going to go into it today, but there's such a big difference between heat levels and spice levels. And it's been very contentious of late. Like...
they're almost a subgenre of their own, really, aren't they? Like, a spice level's really kind of...
Yeah. So you might read across subgenres, but everything you read is high spice or might be closed door romance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mills and Boon, don't they, like, divide their books as, like, Blaze and Desire, and that gives you an idea of like, the sexy content.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's an easy get because the covers show you straight away, and they tend to be coloured so that Desire or Blaze tend to have a lot of red on them, or a certain they have their own logos so that you can immediately pick the kind of sexual heat content and curate your reading.
Gosh, we should do a week on covers because I feel like I could
covers.
The minute you said covers, like, gosh, I could really detour hard here.
I love covers so much, particularly the old school covers. I think
they're great.
Yes, the clinch covers.
Yeah, love them.
Oh, there's so much we can talk about with covers. Okay, I won't derail us too hard. So as we've said, we're kind of dividing our months up by 4 topics. And last week we did a Pamela Regis element.
8 elements.
Essential element. So the ending. So this is, our first subgenre week. And we have picked, I would say, a slightly more obscure, but not really for us, considering that this is Love on Campus subgenre. So this week we're starting with academic romance.
Which is such a thing now.
Huge thing.
I mean, I don't think this was a thing, a few years ago.
No.
The internet still has trouble defining it. I did do some research trying to place us and get some stuff for us to talk about. And I'm not going to lie, it wasn't super easy because I think there's quite a few different definitions or expectations when we come to academic romance. So I'd like first, before I sort of read out what I found, maybe what you guys would define academic romance is?
Set around or in a university, around scholarship or research or teaching.
Yeah, that's how I would define it.
That's how you define it as well.
Yeah.
Cool. That is definitely one of the definitions of academic romance. There was dark academia, which is like a...
Oh, yeah. Dark academia, I don't associate with romance.
Yeah, well, it's not super strict to romance, but it definitely is like Discovery of Witches.
Yeah.
That's dark academia and that's romance.
And I feel like dark academia is, what was I going to say about it? I have no idea. There's like, it has like an aesthetic value to it that people really assign to it. When I think dark academia, I think The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is not a romance at all. So that's interesting.
And there's like those Atlas books.
The Atlas 6.
Yes, the Atlas 6, which I wouldn't have thought, I don't know, I haven't read them, but I don't believe they're romance either, but they are like one of the top clicks at the moment for dark academia. But then some of the really spicy, like BDSM level
because it's about
romance.
Power, right?
Yeah, that's what I
power
wanted
dynamic.
to talk.
Yeah, they also are often put in the dark academia
Can I
category.
just quickly going back to George's comment about the aesthetic?
Yeah.
I think Harry Potter has a bit to do with this.
Yeah.
Like the Hogwarts kind of
Hogwarts
fetishization of a kind of
Completely.
Oxford sandstone, like cloisters.
Oh, yeah.
That kind, the whole.
I'm so
look of
into it.
Yeah.
It's not at all what my academic experiences are like, but I would love them to be like that. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure people at Oxford would also say that they have all these like brand new buildings and they never spend time in the old nice ones.
I have been to Cambridge though, and Cambridge is pretty Harry Potter.
Just a significantly lower level of magic and like vampires and
you might run into a duke or two though, in which case we can get into Regency romance.
Yeah, okay. Oh, Regency academia.
A bit of a Venn diagram.
There are some actually. There are some, and maybe a bit later around blue stockings as well. There are. I'll look them up. I don't have them the names off my head, but there are some.
I've never read any. I would love to read some Regency academia.
I'm going to Google while you're talking then.
Yes.
Read them out.
Okay, so that's one area, and that's funny because I was going to ask what is the appeal, which I think for dark academia we just hit like one nail on the head of that. And then I think it's like anything with that more darker side, like the death and the things like that that cross over.
If you're going to talk about appeals, I think one of the appeals of aca-romance is, I think it's so big, the sort of power dynamic and the navigating the power dynamic of a romance in that sort of essentially like a hierarchical setting.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that's only one. I've actually got 4 here that kind of cover definitions, because then we have like set in academic settings.
Sorry to interrupt. I looked it up and I remember the one I'm thinking of. It's Evie Dunmore's series, that League of Extraordinary Women, and it's set around Oxford, the magical scenery of Oxford, but a bunch of women, the extraordinary women who kind of managed to break into Oxford in that period. But they're Regencies.
Oh,
I'm gonna read
okay.
those.
I think they're Regencies. They might be a little bit later, like into the slightly post-Regency world.
Okay, I love that.
Me too.
Okay, sorry, I will get back on track with my 4 definitions.
I derailed you.
No. It's fine. I'm writing desperately down these books that I need to read, add to my never-ending TBR. So, yeah, set in academic settings, which I kind of think you both nailed that one as
Important.
what you would define academic romance as, one of the big sort of...
Which makes sense to me, because actually most of our students are sort of in that stage of life where they're hooking up and falling in love. Like, and a lot of people meet their partners at university.
Yeah. And there's sort of like university or college romances, which I think are slightly different than the academic setting, because I think academic setting is broader. Like, you don't have to just be in a university environment
Yes, I see what you mean. So they can be like in STEM or some kind of research component.
Well, Love on the Brain, our book club book, I would say doesn't really, like it's not actually set at a university. They reference university, but it's set at NASA.
PhDs.
Yeah, and it's all research adjacent, which I think is part of that academic setting. That
and
engagement.
they met during their PhD?
Yeah.
I would almost say that there has to be, like I wouldn't associate undergraduate. That's probably really weird.
I think college romances is where you hit your undergrad sort of type. Yeah.
And I wouldn't necessarily.
There's a maturity to them, maybe you're saying.
Yeah, and I wouldn't maybe call them academic romances. That's odd.
No, it makes sense to me because academic is about the brain and the kind of person who is pursuing a scholarly pursuit, whereas college romance could be frat boys and keggers,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's why I'm interested in the definition here, because you've got sort of that college university romance that I think a lot of people would still put. Like if you aren't defining it too neatly, you might find some of these books slip in and out. Actually, when I did Google college romances, Elle Kennedy comes up.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's what I would call a college romance, but not aca-romance.
Yeah.
They're all hockey players.
Yes. It's
They're
really
all
into the sports vibes, right?
Sort of,
so then you're saying in order to be academic romance, they have to be people who are academically focused.
Yeah.
Or like a life of the brain.
Oh.
Yeah.
In which case then After could be technically an academic romance. Dear God. sorry After fans.
Okay.
But yeah, because that's set in a university setting and it's definitely based on like the female character in that. Tessa's super into academics and into sex with.
Yeah. But she's just studious really, isn't she?
Yeah, but I guess like what's the difference between studious and academic? What's the cricket button? I'm like, I don't remember which button's the cricket button. Damn.
Oh God, that's funny.
These buttons. So we have a fun little machine here with buttons that do things like this.
That's for our silence.
But they don't have. They just have colours, and so you're supposed to remember the colour code.
Try the purple one.
The purple.
There you go.
Oh, there it was.
Too pretty for cricket.
Amy remembers the colours. I need like pictures. I need pictures to remember these. Because
I don't know. I mean, I think that's just a really hard question. Hence our silence. Is there a difference?
Yeah.
Does academic imply a level of creativity and independent learning, and, for want of a better word, like brilliance or genius? As opposed to being studious where you're just, doing your best to get your degree.
Yeah. And does studious sound too like, so I think academic implies maturity, like we were saying before, and there's like, you're going to not be reading a YA, whereas I think studious, like I was called a studious child or a studious high schooler.
Maybe it's particularly kind of put down to female academics. Very studious. You really work hard.
Were you called studious, Amy? I was called studious.
No, I was not a studious person.
Oh. I was called studious, but I don't think I necessarily was one. Like,
I didn't work hard until university, and then I did it in a very independent, quiet, off by myself way. But I was never a studious high school student.
I had a guy once be like, "You go to all your lectures, don't you?" And I was like, "No. Like, why do you think this about me?" And it was just an assumption because I cared to a certain degree.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I was studious.
I did go
I'm
to
the
all my
nerd.
lectures. I didn't always listen when they were boring, but I did go to my lectures. I used to write during the boring one. No, because I'm from the dark ages, Georgia. So when I was a young'un, they used to run, like, say English 1, the lecture, they would run it twice a day.
Oh
so
my God.
for the people who worked, so there was a 9 a.m. one, and then the poor lecturer would have to repeat it at 5.
Horrible. Did I get?
And then they would record it on a cassette, and you could go to the library if you missed it into the special section, and they'd give you a little cassette player and headphones, and you'd have to listen to it in the library.
Oh my God.
Not like now, you lazy buggers. Just go onto the online platform and watch the recording at double speed because you can't be bothered listening to it.
I mean, I don't do that, but I did do my whole degree online, so I'm being semi-called out. I listen to everything. I attend in person. I would be like the one student in the tutorial online.
Well, you were like a mature age student though, or were you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's a difference in why you're at university, and I think mature age students are often there because they really want to be there and they really want to learn.
Yes, it's so weird to think of myself as a mature age
I
student.
know, young, very young mature age student, but I mean not a school leaver.
Yeah, no, I think it's sort of like once you've had 2 or 3 years away from high school, you're suddenly a mature age student.
Yeah, you are.
And it's a really bizarre thing to be sitting in a class with like 23, 24-year-olds and they're like, these are mature age students. And it's like, oh, I don't think we've got enough life experience here to be called mature.
This is a segue, but part of the fun of this is segues, right? I think it is interesting how much technology has changed academia too.
Oh, hugely.
And also how the generational shift is so huge, like between me and you, like our experiences of universities. Because Georgia was talking before we went on air, about the Oxonian model of learning, and that was my experience in undergrad, that your tutorial was in your tutor's room. There were maybe 6 of you max, and you had to read a paper aloud every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't think
everyone would critique it.
Yeah, I don't
on the
think
spot.
I don't think I would have survived that, and I don't think any current university students
You would have.
I
You
maybe
would
would have. I maybe would have bumbled my way through it, but that's mortifying to me.
There's a lot of public speaking there, that sounds to
Yeah,
me.
but it's a small group, and you get to know them very well.
I think that it would be great. I think that it would encourage.
There was a lot of reading too. Like
Yeah.
English 1 was a book a week plus secondary readings.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I did in my
yeah,
undergrad.
and they were big books too. They weren't like small books.
Yeah, I'm like, I've read, like, that's what I did. And if you did more than one unit, you were doing more than one book.
Yeah, and I was such a history English nerd, so there was so much reading.
I had a lot too.
I'm
'cause I
really
did
grateful
literary.
for it, I have to say.
Yeah, I think it's made us better people.
Yeah,
I think it would have been great.
here we are as academics, studious nerds.
Yeah.
Propping ourselves up. Well done. We've read all the theory.
All right, so we've got academic romance, and then you've got like college
Yeah.
kind of things. What else is there?
So the last one that I kind of found online was like the teacher-student
Yeah.
romance.
Yeah, that's a power thing. That's
yeah.
I find that a bit creepy.
That I think is where my mind sort of goes to.
But you know what? When your teacher is a PhD student, right? Or when you're in the same age bracket and you're also drinking at the pub on the weekend,
Yeah.
it's not as creepy. It's just the power dynamic thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've got mature age now, like we were just talking about.
That's
so
true.
some of the students are well older than the teaching staff. So it's not like the age dynamic really is weird. Like it's not like high school where you've definitely got young people.
I haven't done this for a long time, but I used to teach at a different institution where I taught English 1 for years and years and years. And the teaching team would be huge because we had so many students. We'd have a lot of postgrads teaching. And one of the things with the young male students is you'd have to say, just be aware that there'll be a bit of crushing happening and you need to be really careful because it doesn't necessarily happen the other way in the same way. It's a different problem with young female staff. But it really is true that with young male staff, particularly in the arts, there's there's a power thing, like an attraction to a powerful young man.
Yeah, I was reading The Right to Sex by Amir Srinivasan. I think I pronounced that correctly. And she talks about how it's like they're essentially misplacing transference, like the Freudian transference theory, where like these young women with like male teachers and things like that really just want to be sort of acknowledged and they want to sort of be like the man in that they want to know. I'm probably absolutely butchering how she talks about this. They want to acquire the same knowledge and achieve the same sort of status or
it's also just
sort of
really
thing.
attractive. If you're the kind of person who's into the arts, it's really attractive to meet someone who's further along the journey who loves the books you love.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And apparently, well, she was talking about how men in those positions would like sort of abuse the idea of
historically.
transference. Like they turn it into
that
like
is a thing.
turn it into sexual adoration as opposed to like academic adoration.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're
American
kind of-
Beauty, anyone?
Yeah, but they are kind of hotbeds for romance, love and sex universities because you have so many people, like thousands of people on one campus and all, you know, a lot of single people, a lot of, so yeah, they're kind of seem like a place that you would set a romance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's so some of my note questions here that I have were things like what is the appeal and what do we think is being explored here, which I think we're dancing around a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, the power dynamic has to be like a huge thing that people are drawn
I think
to about
especially with teacher student, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that that's something that God knows, I probably need to talk to a psychologist about it, but I'm drawn to about it, strangely. When you were talking, Amy, about how you see someone who is interested in the same things as you and like they're further along the journey, and that's
You don't
interesting
often
and engaging.
in the wild
No.
meet a guy at a pub who wants to talk about, I don't know,
Books.
Tolstoy with you, or do you know, like who wants to actually get into ideas or philosophy, or
Yeah.
I mean, you do meet them, and they're usually arts guys, right? You meet a fellow
I
art
mean,
student.
do you really meet many of them in the
I know a few.
academy?
If
I
I
have
have
fallen in love with a few of them. So.
if I have met any men like that, it feels like performative just in the
No,
in
I
the
know
moment.
some. I know some book nerds. But I don't know if it's generational again.
Lucas, we're both like,
I just think it's because men kind of my age kind of use it as like an in.
yeah, I was like, they were not in my undergraduate classes.
And I feel like
yeah, maybe this is generational because I was
Yeah.
like an undergrad in the 90s and it was like, you know, there was a recession on then and people went to the pub and talked books and ideas and
no.
like I feel like that was my experience.
It's
So lucky.
strangely. I feel like men are more interested nowadays in the aesthetic of it all. They'd rather like
Aesthetic of having a book.
of
And
having a book and wooing a girl who has also read
it
said
depends
book.
which
and-
book is it. Is it Peterson's 12 Rules?
No, yeah, it's Charles Bukowski and Murakami, and
Oh,
that's what it is.
Oh my God, David Foster Wallace.
Infinite Jest with its own glossary at the back of it.
There's just like a cackle that goes up from academic women when men pull those out. Like, oh gosh, of course. Why wouldn't you be bringing this book out?
His favorite book is The Brothers Karamazov or something like that.
I'm reading Kafka right now. I'm deep.
By my own choice, not because I have to. When I was in undergrad the first time, because I actually did go to university. Like I did go to university straight out of high school and hated it the first 6 months. Like I was like, oh, I was in the wrong degree. But I remember meeting this guy and his name was, I won't say it just in case.
His name was
His name
redacted.
was-
His name was redacted,
First,
but
middle, last name.
think one of those names where you're like, ugh, instantly, like you know that
I was
name.
gonna guess a name, and I'm like, what if you guess the real one?
Yeah, and then you have to tell it.
I'll tell you guys off of the public sphere. But he just had this name that's really pretentious kind of name, and he was, everything about him was pretentious. He had the floppy hair and he just thought he was so smart and he was just so interesting. And, you know, you couldn't possibly like a pop song. You couldn't, I mean, when I was I know. Right?
I unfortunately had a crush on a man like that.
Yeah, well,
Really
that's the
dark
thing.
time in
They
my
did.
life.
They do. They are very appealing, I think, when you're first out of high
Yeah.
school. Because he was pulling girls left, right, and center. And I am such a bitch because that kind of thing, I was like, I don't know, maybe because I was well read. Like I was reading romances and books and everything then. So I was like, I see through you. You're full of shit.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like I was instantly just like, oh, I got to challenge this guy. Like this guy's going to piss me off. Like but he didn't enjoy the challenge. Like he wasn't one of those guys like that's romanticized
Can't, like,
in the books.
Spar.
Yeah.
There's no like.
There's no enemy to lovers shit here.
This is not like one of those
Yeah.
screwball comedies from the 40s where the dialogue's like quick and fast.
Yeah. No, this guy was
It's
just
not
a dick.
It's not academic rivals. It just can't go into that.
Yeah.
I unfortunately have fallen for that. The whole like talks up and like you could never like a pop song and God forbid. I think I told him once about I was going into my masters when I was about to do my masters, and I think I told him that I wanted to study romance, and he was like, "Oh, weird, dumb, stupid," and I fell for that. Like,
Yeah.
oh.
They're very seductive. Like there's a
Yeah.
seductiveness to this kind
And-
of guy
and
in
some-
academia, but in reality they're assholes.
Because there is a whole book about how to pull women that includes negging them.
No,
Yeah, that's what
they're
this kind of guy was
They're
like.
evolving as well, though, because they'll They're evolving because they'll be like,
They grow two heads now.
yeah, like you'll make a joke and you'll be like, oh, what do you read Murakami? And he goes, actually, I have read Murakami and I didn't like his representation of women and I thought that he really sexualized them. They're evolving. They're evolving.
Oh my God. Do you know how many times I have had arguments with academic men who want to tell me about how the representation of some text I like doesn't represent women very well or is sexist? And it's just like, I don't think you even know what you're talking about.
No,
I know.
Just a couple buzzwords to try and see if they can hook you.
Yeah, they haven't actually read any feminist texts. They haven't actually read the academics, but they know like the one line to use to make everyone think they have. Like, oh, I've read the Spark Notes. It's fine.
Us talking about aca-romance is essentially just getting into us and our romantic interests and like, romantic experience as academic people.
Well, I think because this is getting back to this idea though that this is one of the sites of love is universities.
Yeah.
And there are such weird power imbalances, so gender imbalances, but then also, you know, teaching students, but also age, like whether you're in third year of your degree or the first year of your degree, whether you've got a lot of tutors are very young.
And I think there's like this renewed sense of independence that, you know, you've just come out of high school.
Yeah.
And for the first time you get to be your own person.
It takes a while to grow into that. Like first years take a while to relax into university life.
I was so anxious and scared first year.
Yeah.
I'm still not even totally relaxed into my sort of education.
That's probably because you're smart enough to know there's always more to know. But also, I mean, we're skating around sex too. Like universities are sexual hotbeds.
Yeah.
I worked at a different institution, not Flinders, but another one where they had like this student area with all new furniture.
Oh,
and
no.
They broke all the furniture within the first year by having sex on it.
Oh, I thought you were going to do that. I thought you were going to do some like, is it the like light thing?
Oh,
where
no, it was very stained.
Oh.
There's a reason why you walk in and it's all plastic and you can wipe it down, people.
No. My brain is here. I used to work at the cinema, so
That's just as bad.
yeah. Definitely got some grosso stories from there, so I understand what that would have been like. That's hilarious because I did my degree online.
This is on topic. I promise this is on topic. Have you seen on YouTube there's this great video of a female lecturer who it's the recording of her lecture. She's in one of those raked lecture theatres and she suddenly stops and she's like, oh my God, I can see what you're doing. Like just because you put a jacket over your lap doesn't mean. And then she goes, it's not even the first time this has happened.
Oh, why?
She's like, I can see you people, but it's like people think that you're like on a screen or something. Like you're standing there down the bottom. Because I've had people making out in lectures before, and it's like, really? Like I can see
the confidence. What is like? Am I a prude here or something? Because I would never have the confidence to just do that in a lecture.
Must be a turn on. They're like public exhibitionists.
Yeah, I guess there's a kind of person which like good for you. You know what? Do what you want to do, but maybe not in a lecture. It's kind of disrespectful.
But again, okay, so then we're getting to questions of appropriate professional behaviour, right? That's where we get to with these books and the difference between fantasy and reality.
Well, in The Love Hypothesis, which is a book by Ali Hazelwood, there's constantly references to Title X. Is that what it's called in the US? Some sort of like, it's some sort of HR document or something.
Well, I'm looking this up. I've heard reference to it, but I
think
don't want to comment.
Title X, Title IX, something where she's a PhD student and he's a professor, but in like a slightly adjacent department, and they fake date. And so there's constant references to when they're following the protocol and when...
Title X is apparently something to do with family planning.
Oh. Title IX? I don't know what it is. It's something that academic institutions in the US... So there's like constant reference to it throughout, like, are we being professional? Is this allowed? Can this even happen? Blah, blah, blah. So that's interesting. And I also think that the chosen dynamics between who are the two people falling in love in aca-romances are. So in Love on the Brain, they're both relatively the same age and they were both in like PhDs at different year levels. But
they also didn't hook up while they were students, right?
They hook up when they're equals in a job.
PhD students can hook up. Like, that's fine. There's nothing about hooking up with a colleague who's a PhD student.
No. And it's interesting this sort of, like I read another book called My Oxford Year, and he's a TA, he's a teaching assistant, and she's a master's student.
Did anyone ever watch the TV show Felicity? I think it's just back on one of the streaming services.
No, but I've heard of it.
It's like forever ago, like back in the dark ages again. But there is a few seasons where she hooks up with her TA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I, as someone who works as a teaching assistant, could not do that.
No.
It would just,
I
like,
believe
just
it's
couldn't do
illegal.
it.
And I think it's a storyline in Dawson's Creek as well. I think Joey dates her professor.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it was always very common. It's only since the rise of,
Me too.
you know, well, even probably a bit before that, like since the rise of HR practices, right?
Yeah.
Of like, but you know, when things were more.
I don't even think I could do it after contractual obligations or anything like that. Like, I think that the power imbalance kind of lingers. Like, I think it would. Well, I don't know.
I think it's very situational.
Yeah, so situational.
I have to be careful here because
I said that and then I was like, oh,
because
God.
my current partner, I did once teach when he was a third year, but we didn't date until many years later.
Well, that's like a
many
plot.
years later. Yeah.
That's why I threw that caveat in. Situational.
But it was weird. Like, but I was teaching maybe 500 people a year.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I had a one-on-one relationship with him when he was third year. And he
It
was
wasn't the
mature age.
6 people in your
No,
tutorial
no.
room.
He was a mature age student, and it was like I only actually remembered because he has a really memorable name, and I was like, "Did I teach you once?" But yeah, so it is a bit weird, and we live in a small town too. Really, like I know it's not that small a town;
It does
it's like a
feel
million
like it,
people,
yeah.
but there are 3 universities.
And when you sort of break them down,
But I do know of academics who are married to previous students and previous PhD students.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, it might happen to me, who knows, but.
Not
That's a
with
big
me, though.
deal.
I know, I'm taken. Sorry, Georgia, I'm taken.
Not my previous
gosh.
PhD supervisor. I didn't even think about the context.
I was like, we've just derailed ourselves right into like, are you hitting on your...
I meant like,
Not that I'm not flattered, Georgia, but
I meant like previous students.
yeah, but the thing
My
is
previous
it
students.
can happen. Like it's not like it, but it's about power and recognizing not doing it when it's an abuse of power, right? That was a
I said
great
it at the
joke.
wrong time. I
Yeah.
said it at the wrong time.
Now I'm feeling insulted.
No, I wish.
What's the problem here, Georgia?
It's the height difference, isn't it?
For those of you who don't know, Georgia is very tall and Amy is not so much very tall.
He's very, very short.
I'm like Piggy in the middle.
But the interesting thing is the power dynamic that, and I think, you know, we've only just started the podcast, but I think we're going to come back to this issue a lot of fantasy versus reality.
Yeah.
That you can kind of act out some things in a fantasy space that you would not condone in real life.
That it could work out in a sort of aca-romance books, and you could make it work entirely and manage the power imbalance and be legally upstanding.
'Cause I think
You can play with it, right? You can play with it in romance. Like you can, if you're writing
all
it.
the different dynamics that maybe would work in
There is
the sort of aca-romance scenario.
There is some statistic which I don't have on the tip of my tongue, but about how most people, a big proportion of people will meet their partners in a work environment. That people end up with
I've
people they
seen
work
that.
with. And there's something about it being someone you're thrown together with all the time and that you see all the time and that you can develop a relationship with.
Shared interest.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So there's nearly always a power problem there, even if you're kind of equals.
You know what? I don't know if I know anybody who actually is with someone from their workplace.
I think everyone I know who met at work now works in different places. Like they've gone out of their way to, you know, after a while you get sick of working in the same place with your partner, I think, because it's weird. It just causes weirdnesses. It just does.
There'd be a lot of conflicts.
Seeing them too often.
My parents used to run a business together and that caused a lot of conflicts.
Yeah. And just I think, seeing them all the time, yes, and having the same context, but also, you know, being in meetings together as it gets a bit weird and
you can't leave anything at work, right? Like it all comes home.
No.
That would
And
be
then
hard.
Politics. What if you're on different sides of the issues at work?
Yeah. So is this like dancing with maybe opposites attract is actually a easier or more appealing idea? Like Is it? I don't know.
Does that happen very often, do you think?
Opposites attract.
Well, like, they've found, I think, again, I don't have the statistics on how to back this up or the facts. This is just going on what I've read broadly, that men will often be comfortable marrying women without the same level of education or experience. But women they're not so comfortable marrying women who are more educated or more experienced or earning more money.
Yeah, which is so interesting.
Yeah. Disappointing.
That's
the word I would use.
That really limits the pool.
It does. I think that's true.
No wonder academic romance is appealing then, because like
someone on like the same level.
Just someone who likes us because we're smart. My God.
Honestly, that maybe that is like the big appeal. Someone who's like in the same sphere as you, learning the same things.
I think it matters, right? Like if he's reading David Foster Wallace, the fact that you could mention something you've read and they know what you're talking about, right? Like even I'm thinking as you go up through like master's, PhD, to be able to talk about literary theory, for example, to be able to go home and say, I'm struggling with this bit of the code and have them not run screaming is something.
It would be, I imagine.
I mean, I kind of love someone to understand the sort of academic side of things that I do experience, because I don't have any friends outside of you guys that know much about academia.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't just leave it there. I don't have friends outside of you guys. I'm like, Georgia.
So I know you have friends.
Like, don't lie to me.
Well, it's not like they don't try to understand, but sometimes it is just like a matter of experience.
I don't talk about it outside of work circles. Like my partner has a PhD as well, so I can talk to him. And we do talk about this stuff a lot. But in terms of other like family or friends who are not from an academic background, I tend to just not talk about it at all.
No, I'm the same. And but I can't, like, not that I can't talk about it with my partner, but he's not from academia. He's a smart person, but he's like a electronic technician, so his smarts are in a just completely different field, which actually is something that I want to talk about with academic romance, because talking about like cross fields and different fields. So I think we're looking, like I would say we're looking at a big rise in STEM romances.
Absolutely.
That would be so fun if there was like a humanities person and a STEM person falling in love.
I do think that Ali Hazelwood's starting to play with that, because her next one is, I think that's just come out or about to come out, it's called Love Theoretically. But I don't think she quite pushes. I think she's starting to get into the idea of crossing between, say, a more humanities and STEM.
But then there is such a hunger for STEM, because I think STEM, I'm just going to be essentialist and say women, because I think so far the romance has been pretty heteronormative and straight. I think there's such a hunger for STEM women to be represented and to find themselves in these kinds of fantasies. Because I think often it's people like us from the humanities who tend to go into writing and they just have not seen their experiences dramatised in romance.
Absolutely.
And I think if you're thinking about like classes too, I imagine STEM classes are overwhelmingly male.
Yeah.
And then
whereas we're the other way.
Yeah, humanities have a larger female cohort, generally speaking, depending on what area of humanities maybe, but generally
it probably
speaking.
depends on which area of the humanities, but overwhelmingly we are majority female.
You're at least going to find more women in humanities.
Well, and not just female. I'm being reductive there too. We actually have huge diversity. There's a lot of non-binary people, a lot of trans people, a lot of in our classes now. I would say you see a great diversity, because I feel like the humanities are a place where things are questioned.
Yes.
And boundaries are pushed a bit, and I think they've been very accepting of diversity. Whereas I do think STEM is still a fairly patriarchal spot.
I think that like STEM romances would be super interesting about also sort of finding equal footing with the men in your field, where you're often, because that's something Ali Hazelwood often talks about. They're like, what does she call it in the book? Sausage.
Worst Fest.
Oh yeah, Worst Fest.
I've got
all
them
that
here
sort of stuff.
because I love them.
They're so funny.
Dare I say I sort of think they're a little bit millennial.
Why are you saying that like it's a problem?
Maybe
so, and also Cock Cluster, which I thought was
Cock Cluster and Worst Fest. So I feel like it's almost about the characters a lot of the time finding, like, having that equal relationship with a man in their field.
Well, I
a
also
certain extent.
noticed something that's very interesting is that something like the KISS quotient,
Yes.
Yeah.
that's classified as a STEM academic romance, which is not what I would
that's
have.
interesting. Just because she's a what's it called?
Statistician or
An
something?
econometrician.
Yeah, econometrician.
Because she works in STEM, but works in it. She's not
And
like
she's just really smart.
Yeah,
I
'cause
would call
that's
that like
smart.
a STEM romance. I don't know if I'd call it an academic one.
but I don't even know if it would be STEM really. Like,
Because there's
Because
not,
it's
a
not a
focus on it.
focus.
no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a Cinderella retelling, isn't it? Really in reverse.
Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty Women.
So I find it very interesting that it's literally like you take a smart woman who's not in a humanities career and suddenly she's a STEM academic romance.
That's true, because if she was in a humanities area or an arts area or marketing that's
romances.
Right. Yeah, that's right. They wouldn't necessarily call it
No.
an academic romance. That's totally true.
Yeah, so I was really like fascinated to see the KISS quotient coming up a lot on these STEM lists because I was
But
like,
that
wow.
might just gesture at how starved people are for women in STEM representation.
Yeah, hugely. Which I'm probably relatively detached from because I've never been a particularly
I'm not a
STEMmy person.
No, neither.
But I have so many friends in STEM engineers who their experiences are so interesting. They always talk about how the men in their engineering courses are like, well, of course you're going to be hired after graduation because you're a woman.
Vomit.
Oh, the
Always.
worst.
A lot of them say
Vomit.
that. They're like, you're immediately going to be hired because they need to diversify and things like that. I was teaching in an engineering building the other day and I went to go and find a bathroom and there was only a male toilet in the building.
Yeah, that
It's like
doesn't shock
It's like
me.
it's like a 6-floor building. I was like, it's just not one woman's toilet at all.
No.
It's crazy. Like it just, even the literal structural
Yep.
sexism. Like it's
and
structural.
still,
Yeah,
still,
still.
2023.
Like it is insane to me, and my friends talking about their experiences, like they do FIFO work, so fly in, fly out work.
Oh man, that would be intense.
Oh my god, so intense.
That would be a worst fest.
hugely,
Yes.
and they're so knowledgeable and they so know what they're doing. They're incredibly smart women, and I don't really know much about
There was all
what their
that
experiences are like, but it's
fuss last year about how sexually harassed women in FIFO are.
Yeah, hugely. And I just think it's interesting to see these, academic romances, STEM romances, where they do find equal footing with men, and
Yeah.
they do maybe find.
Well, any male-dominated
navigating.
career is honestly like that. Military is no different.
Yeah.
The
I'm really-
the way the men used to treat. So my partner is ex-military, and the way that the men used to talk about like how the quotas, there'd be quotas.
Yeah.
And they hate them, they detest them. But a lot of the women don't like the quotas either because it raises the question that they're just there, like you were saying, to sort of fill the quota.
They're constantly made to feel.
Except that when institutions, or like if you think about our political parties like the ALP and the Liberals, when you get rid of a quota, what you find is there are no women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the systemic embedded sexism when people appoint
It doesn't
people.
mean that the women that are being hired or, anything are less capable. It just means that they've been given the chance that they
But
would
it's
often
this
denied.
this feeling like men are missing out. Like
They're
it's just
all
like
so worried about missing out
about
things.
losing some of the power they have.
And imagine if they took 1 second to step away and go, oh, hang on, she's actually doing her job properly. Maybe it's not just because of a quota that she's here. Like they can't even do that because the threat of her being there and being good at the job somehow, for some reason, makes them question their ability to do the job.
I don't even know if it's that or if it's just this sense of like how unfair for us, but not recognizing how unfair it has been for everyone else all the time.
Well, how unfair for a woman that she needs a quota to get in the door. Like, that's bullshit. Like, it's just so gross.
Like
I've got a lot of friends in these
say that
industries that they've said to me, I don't know if I'm here because I'm good at my job or a quota, but I know I'm good at my job.
They work hard and they try to, because they do sort of deal with that insecurity, and they go, well, what am I want to make sure that I'm good at my job and that I'm doing my job well.
Yeah.
And continually they'll just always be told.
So I'm
otherwise.
keen when we get to our book club to unpack some of this because you guys have both said a couple of times how great to see books where they're both equal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious about unpicking that, about whether they are equal or whether the man is still conferring equality upon her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that's definitely an aspect, but
Well,
this book is interesting.
speaking of our book club, we are heading towards time, so I'm gonna.
Oh my God, we might
round
actually
us
keep
up.
to time.
Well,
Crack that whip, Kathleen.
I'm going to round us up, and I'm going to round us up with one final comment about one of the tropes that was huge when I was looking up academic romance is academic rivals to lovers, which is definitely what our book Love on the Brain touches on, which leads us to what will be next week's episode on tropes, which George is going to lead us through with enemies to lovers.
Which is like everyone's favourite trope, right?
Oh my God. Oh my God, we love it.
So let's leave academic rivals to lovers here, and we'll see you next week when we get into all things enemies to lovers.
See ya.
Bye.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.